Now, the coronavirus pandemic has meant that we've all had to adapt to new ways of life, including how we interact with one another. We're calling more and meeting much less, and even then at a social distance. But what have these changes meant for people who are affected by hearing loss? The Nine's Tamsin Selby visited Forth Valley Sensory Centre to find out more.
The main thing we've been doing is trying to keep in touch with all of our centre users through a variety of means that work for those individuals. In some cases that's phone calls, in some cases text. We use video conferencing, and really that's about as good as it gets. And obviously it's not ideal for people with sensory loss.
We're not a medical centre, it's not a place that you come in and you get a cure for your eyesight. That doesn't happen. But we are a place for people to be sociable.
Most of our communication is non-verbal, whether that's a facial expression, a hand gesture or our body language to illustrate what we mean. Now, for people with hearing loss, these non-verbal signs are absolutely vital. So if we're being asked to take 2 meters back, or maybe wear one of these, then lots of what we say may be lost in translation.
We hear this phrase a lot, the new normal. Whatever happens with that, once we come out the other side of the coronavirus crisis, it may well be that social distancing stays in place, or it might be that masks become more of a common sight in day-to-day life, and that will be a real challenge for thousands of people.
I've had centre users that have been really quite upset because perhaps they haven't heard instructions like wait in line, stand 2 meters apart. People have felt embarrassed because they've been shouted at by shop assistants to get back and don't come near, and also other members of the public who may not appreciate that a person is deaf.
Lindsay is one of the centre's members and primarily uses lip reading to understand what others are saying. She's worried that the use of face masks might leave her out of the conversation.
It actually makes me feel quite anxious. Masks cover the whole of the face. I know they only come up to your eyes, but they cover so much expression in some people, which means I lose lip reading, but I also lose like whether people are happy or sad, are they actually talking to me at all? Like that whole communication is just removed by that, and it frightens me quite a bit. But I understand why it's necessary, and I think we all do as deaf people understand why it's necessary. It's just one of those barriers that I guess scares us a lot.
Another concern for those with hearing loss is the use of personal protective equipment in hospitals. I spoke to Janice MacDonald from Deaf Scotland, who explained the anxiety that might accompany an emergency call.
We're hearing stories about people actually being fearful because if you're ill and you're in a position of having to be taken in an ambulance to a hospital with all the PPE and the people dressed up and not communicating well, it can really heighten the anxiety significantly, and that must have a long-term impact. We've had a lot of very tragic stories, really, because it's communication that helps the humanity, and it's been interrupted by this virus.
In some ways, it will make people more sort of empathetic to what a lot of people with hearing impairments must feel like, that feeling of isolation in not having full communication with somebody.
I would hope it gives some insight because sometimes it's quite difficult to talk about how you experience deafness yourself. Many people, myself included, would be more inclined to be a bit more isolated anyway. It's good that people are understanding communication, because I think fundamentally that's what will make a difference going forward.
For those at the centre, the hope is that with more people being forced to communicate in different ways during lockdown, the more understanding and empathy there will be in making sure those with sensory loss are kept in the conversation. Tamsin Selby, BBC News, Falkirk.